Yo, what's good, guys? Today, going to be talking about the newest project to come from Sudden Death. If you have not heard of Sudden Death or have never listened to electronic music, he is a primarily dubstep producer, electronic artist from San Jose, California, who I and several others would agree is in a lane of his own. He brings theatrics and progressive sound design, and juxtaposes that with minimal but really effective drum patterns and just aesthetics altogether. And he does it really well. He's always had a distinct sound, and I've been happy to see him gain recognition and also gain a larger audience over the years. He's been active since about 2017, if not a little bit earlier than that. And many saw him as a rising star, and I think he's finally coming into his own. He's got such a unique sound and style that really stands out, in my opinion. This most recent project, entitled Voyd 2, serves as a sequel to previous projects that he has put out before. And this feels like a culmination of those projects. It feels like the definitive experience of what his project is, Voyd. So there's not a lot of lyrical content to discuss here. So I'm just going to give a play-by-play, my highlights, what I got out of the music, the experience as a whole. To start off with, track one, entitled Act One, is a very cold and dark intro to the project, featuring a large computer-generated voice that we've heard from Sudden Death before, and we've come to associate with Sudden Death. And with that, we have our intro to his newest iteration of the series. Leads right into track number two, entitled Maze of Punishments. The song picks up right where the intro left off, and it features a lot of dark and sparkly synths coming together, cool colors coming together, and we have an eerie arpeggio which leads into a synth drone of sorts. We hear a nightmarish vocal sample with lyrics that read, "We are born to suffer, we are born to die, so come now and stand and embrace your inner evil." This is legitimately the soundtrack to my dreams turned to nightmares. It's terrifying stuff. The drops in this first track are brutal, especially the first one. And I would like to note that it's incredible how he manages to sample other songs of his from the past, such as Behemoth. That's a heavy hitter from him. You hear that a lot at shows nowadays. It's a fan favorite, honestly. And on that note, the build-up leading into the first drop for Behemoth was extremely unsettling, and then we're met with a VIP version of Behemoth. It's not uncommon for dubstep producers and EDM producers in general to release VIP edits of certain songs. You could think of it as like remixes or alternate versions of those songs. He switches things up a lot to keep the sound fresh as he weaves through his catalog, and he goes from one song to another from previous iterations of Voyd. And it really offers glimpses into what feels like a live performance from Sudden Death, which was awesome to experience, honestly. Track number three, Dream Sequence. This has one of my favorite intros of all the song, any song that has come out of the contemporary EDM era. I think this intro is really, really solid stuff. It sounds like a ghastly soundtrack to some horror game that could have come out on the PS1 or on the Nintendo 64. It has a very distinct soundscape that comes with it. The first drop is entirely it's crazy stuff. It's on its own wavelength, featuring violent drums, brutal growls, and there's tons of chirps that come together to create a glitchy yet bloody picture. It's really cool. Yeah, it all comes together so organically, and the second drop and its respective build-up are also really sinister, featuring chromatic melodies and a thick, distorted bass line. I really love the grittiness of the synths and samples that he uses here. And the final build-up in the song, it sounds like, imagine Michael Myers just caught sight of you on the street, and suddenly he decided that you were going to be his next victim, his next target. That's what it feels like. What follows is a grim beat drop featuring a simple melody that kind of carries that section. Track number four, Shallow Land Burial, features a beautiful jungle breakbeat that leads into a drop that I know that I've heard before. but if I'm not mistaken, it was previously unreleased. This isn't something that we've had released commercially before. The drop is wobbly and it's really scratchy. It's kind of akin to, like, imagine a couple of metals rubbing and scraping against each other. It's kind of is really violent stuff. The transition to the second drop, while a bit jarring, I think works just because the new melody is introduced quickly and we get a brutal breakdown thrown at us. And the melody feels like it's something tossed into a blender, and everything comes together. The drums keep the tune chugging along, the bass, everything works so well. The second drop feels like you've been uploaded into the Matrix, and suddenly you're faced with the terror of having your body cease to exist, and you forcefully assume a new digital form of existence. It's horrifying stuff. Track number 5, Act 2, features a terrifyingly sinister build-up with scratched and chopped up sounds of what could be white noise and other atonal sounds, all sorts of like samples coming together. And then this leads into a gargantuan vocal sample that really shakes you to your core, and it's almost like you can feel your heart is about to stop. The lyrics here for the vocal sample read, "I am the face of many shadows, I'm just the one that you see." And we have a clear idea of the place that Sudden Death is trying to drop the listener into. What soon follows are dim synths that sound like, just imagine the candles that can be found along the walls throughout Luigi's mansion. Something spooky, something eerie like that. And then maybe my favorite part, we get a section with pizzicato strings like violins and violas and other stringed instruments. And I know that these were sampled bits that he wove together to create something new, different melodies and chord progressions, but I think it's done masterfully, and to an untrained listener, to the untrained ear, could pass as an actual orchestra. Soon we feel icicles start to fall in the form of bright and sparkly stabs, and it's a beautiful mix. Everything, all the synths coming together so well. And the outro features whispers and a bright synth melody that feels really uneasy. And with that, we transition into track number 6, entitled Magic Armor. Picking up where Act 2 left off, this song features a creepy vocal sample which builds into the drop of probably my favorite sound to come out of this set of tracks that we've heard in his live sets in the last year and a half. The build-up here is eerie and cold, with feathery synths and vocal samples prepping you for what is a very sinister sound. The drop features a deliciously crisp, distorted bass and an incredible groove. We get hints of light and color with what I personally would describe as like bells, or kind of like a hit sound, like a big xylophone, something with a tone like that. It's very nice. The entire first half of the song feels like you're trapped in a cave, and the second half of the song is like you've finally found your way out of this cave. The transition after that first drop is very bright, and it feels a little bit more hopeful. And the second drop is a blend of the both previously established melodies, where we get a taste of a massive supersaw and is being laid on top of the previously heard bass line of the first drop. It's like peanut butter and jelly. It's all rich, and it works together so well. Track number 7, Eidolon Hex. This song honestly sounds like you can imagine a sample from like a long lost Legend of Zelda game that we never got on the Nintendo 64 era, whatever that game may have been. It tastes just like the soundscapes that you would hear on a game like that. The chromatic chord progressions add a sense of despair, and this, coupled with a bitter tasting arpeggiated synth, it offers the listener a very grim and a very terrifying scene. It's scary stuff. We then get transported to a brick wall of sound featuring thick kick drums and a fat bass. It all hits hard enough to make the hairs on your arms vibrate. It's really heavy stuff. We can also hear a slimy synth with some distortion onto it. It's very bubbly, and I like the way that it sounds. And then we transition into a modified version of the first drop with extra bubbles, if you will, and the drum samples change a little bit, creating a different change in the tone. This then transitions into a transitional section that features the melodies and sample that you've heard at the intro, and this time featuring an amen break thrown in there, and with distorted, chopped up chirps, and it feels extra demented, and it's beautiful, honestly. Track number 8, Thirst for Revenge. The intro features cool synth chords, and it feels like you're wading through, like, you're walking through some shallow waters and it's freezing cold. The song builds up into a creepy, dissonant, transitional set of chords, which drop us into what I think feels like a maze that sits in the middle of like some sort of haunted carnival. It's really creepy. And then soon thereafter, we're face to face with what sounds like a giant entity, like it's massive. And the sample says, "I've been waiting for you." And we're left, after this, we're left with a dissonant, buzzing synth, just very brief. And then after that, we get the first drop. It's massive, minimal, it's effective, it works. Brutal kicks and snares, and a heavily distorted and syncopated bass groove chugs along. The second part is just as demented, and it does feel similar, but there's differences found in the fills and the transitions that you hear between sections at this drop. The second half is very distinct. The second half of the song, it's very hopeful, as if hinting at a major sounding tonality. I can't tell what kind of mode or what key it is. I can't identify it. And there's arpeggiated melodies and bright synths creating a colorful setting. And the drop that follows is huge. And the arpeggios don't stop, but they feel a little bit more muted to kind of let other instruments and sounds shine through. After this drop, we have a transition that brings me back to Luigi's Mansion. There's creepy bowed strings playing on the bass, and then there's beautiful pizzicato accompanying this. We transition into track number 9, entitled Act 3. I had chills. The scene, imagine we find what sounds like a small room, but it's frozen in there as far as you can tell, and then you sense that something else is in there with you. And suddenly you hear a bass line start to creep in, making the hairs on your neck stand up because you're terrified. You don't know what's coming. And then we have a very gradual build-up, which eventually leads to the most terrifying thing that I've heard from Sudden Death so far. The only way I can describe it is like a wall of crunchy saw waves, all playing a million notes all at once. It's just a wall of sound that hits the listener. And then this all fades out as soon as it hit. It's gone as soon as it appears. And then we're met with the most beautiful sound that I have heard from Sudden Death so far. It's a very stark contrast. On that note, I have heard comparisons, and I've seen comparisons online between Sudden Death and Porter Robinson for whatever reason. I think that their sounds are polar opposites, but both are exceptionally beautiful in their own rights, and I feel like this is where maybe Sudden Death is kind of nodding to those comparisons, if he's aware of them, maybe. We get some of the most gorgeous and completely unexpected music from Sudden Death. It stands out so much just because it feels like it's the light at the end of the tunnel. We've reached some sort of like hope, a moment of escape, maybe. And then after this, we get an amazingly crunchy beat drop. We get a synth string that's been distorted, and it conjures up feelings of like you're being sent to another dimension. It's really cool. And then we lead into a disgusting section, like it's gross, that feels atonal and demented, but I say gross in a good way. It's really cool. And the ending is very, especially it's malicious, and it's the perfect transition into the next track, track number 10, Laughing Track. This aptly titled song is a song that we've heard before in live sets, if you've been following Sudden Death. We get an insanely crunchy bass and laugh samples thrown together with massive drums. So just imagine like a giant frog is after you and is trying to attack you. It's gigantic and it's daunting. After this drop that we're familiar with, we get a taste of a very different section. If I could paint a picture, just imagine we're in a giant building and we just found the broiler room. It's noisy, it's eerie, it's gigantic, it's loud. In the song, there's a ton of chirps, bleeps. It's a noisy mix, but it's really nice. And the outro sounds kind of like a broken toy that you would like a stereotypical toy that you would hear in a horror movie, like something's wrong with the toy and there's like a poltergeist in the house or something like that. And with that, we transition into track number 11, Comprehension Barrier. This feels like an extension of the wall of sound that we've had tastes of in the project before this point, but it's stretched out. The intro to this song is terrifying, it's menacing, and the drop itself is grimy, and the subsequent build-up shines. There's like a bright sample that illuminates things just for a little bit, and then like the lights flicker on and off uncontrollably at the next drop. You've got a very chippy and chopped up bass line. It's really cool stuff. And the second drop, of course, is big. It's in your face, and it's a very slimy section. The outro to this song is like a gooey black. There's like flangers and filters going crazy on different samples, and the song has a lot of frantic energy. This is some good dubstep. I can't deny it. This transitions into track number 12, Demonic Curse. Finally, we get this funky banger released commercially. I've heard it in sets before, and I was like, I need that song on streaming. And finally, we got it. The build-up is dark, featuring a distorted set of synth strings. The drop features grim and crunchy bass, glitchy arpeggios, and a beat that feels like the drum pattern. It's like a giant elephant is coming towards you, and you don't know what it's going to do. It's a very minimal approach to dubstep, but it's very effective. And the transition after this first drop brings us back to that unsettling broken toy that we heard earlier, but this time it hits harder, it's louder, it's bigger. And the second drop tastes kind of like the first, but it's a little bit more subdued. It's a little different. There's occasionally huge synth hits that come out of nowhere and indicate that like you're in a giant space with something really big. And there's also a glitchy hint of a melody that appears occasionally. It just kind of pops in and out, and it's got a lot of cool distortion thrown onto it. And then towards the end at the outro, we get a laugh sample that sounds like the broken toy, and finally we fade out. With that, we transition into track number 13, Rings of Pluto. This song starts off with a great jungle beat, and I'm not familiar with the sample that we can hear here, but I love it, and it feels familiar. It's the phrase, rock like this. It's just repeated over and over again. The first drop of this song is thick, it's bouncy, it's got some scratchy, distorted, high-pitched synths playing, and it feels like you're gripping like a handful of steel wool. It's painful, it's scratchy, it's cold. The second drop is straight up demented, and I imagine that this is what it feels like when an angry angry sea bear off of SpongeBob is attacking you. Like that's probably what the angry sea bear is hearing in his head. It's massive. It's terrifying. Track number 4, Kereberat. The intro to this song kind of feels like we're in Bowser's castle. It's really eerie, it's creepy, and we've got a dark and deep synth string that's chugging along. It's kind of like imagine an upright bass being bowed, kind of like that. The vocal sample that we hear at this part is exactly the type of voice that I would hear in my nightmares as a child, with lyrics that read, "When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." And with that, eventually we hit the first drop, and we get the sickest and most distorted basses that I've ever heard. It's massive and it's crunchy. It's brutal stuff, but it's something that I would expect from other similar contemporary acts. Think of artists like Code Pandorum, for example, if you're familiar with his music. And then we also have a high-pitched synth with a lot of vibrato. Maybe it's detuning, serving the purpose of kind of emulating vibrato, I'm not sure. But it paints a very eerie scene at this drop. The transition after that drop is just as heavy, featuring a giant saw bass. Like it's like a drone, and it has no business being as fat as it is. It's massive. The next drop after this is similar to the first, but the energy's turned down just a little bit. And then we quickly transition into the final super bubbly beat drop. It's a blend of the previous sections that we've heard in the song. And then finally at the outro, once again, we find ourselves at the castle doors. We transition into track number 15, entitled Act 4. This is a very quiet intro. There's a lot of subtle sampling happening here. Features beautifully soft synth strings that kind of seem to chase each other around. Not like in a fugue, like in the classical sense of the word, but it feels like a fugue of sorts. It's kind of hard to explain. The strings are constantly moving. There's different themes and motifs that kind of shine through here. And this interlude really grows and expands towards the end. And then we hear the motif, the melodic theme that we heard earlier in the project. I think it was during Maze of Punishment, but it's a different key and it's pitched down. It's not quite a sample, but it's pitched down to a lower frequency, and it's all really cool stuff. It's very eerie. It sets the tone so well for what's about to follow. Track number 16, Valley of Darkness. This track is beautifully sinister, and the intro feels familiar, and I know that's because I've heard it in some of Sudden Death's live sets that we've heard back in like 2020 and 2021. The first buildup is dark, it's windy, you can hear a lot of high-pitched sounds and synths that are humming along, and the first drop features a gargantuan set of like Hoover hits, like Hoover synths that are hitting you, and there's like staccato, crispy bass accompanying that. The drums are huge. It's imposing. It's just in your face. And then the second drop to this song is glitchy, and it feels like the song is just barely holding on. Just imagine like you're in a vicious fight and you keep taking hits to the head, so like you can feel yourself about to fall over. You're stumbling. That's kind of what the drop feels like. After this, the song ends on a very quiet sine wave drone, and I think it's a very powerful note to end the song on, just because the song is so chaotic, and then suddenly we have a hint of like peace, but it still makes you uneasy. And then we transition into Twilight Reflector. This song features cool, sparkly synths and icy saw melodies that lead us into a giant beat drop. The drums are going to be knocking violently, no matter what type of speakers or no matter what type of quality speakers a speaker or sound system you're playing it on. It's just big stuff. The melody here feels like a muted super saw that's being sucked into a vacuum of some kind. And then the second drop is just as big, but it does feel different. It's not just the same thing. The high-end synths feel a little bit more muted here, just so we get more of the bass and the drums shining through. The drum pattern also changes a little bit here as well. And the outro to this song feels a lot like the intro. It's very bright. With that, we finally transition into track number 18, entitled Final Act. This is the closer to the album. And the album here ends on a calm, serene tone. There's a quiet, upbeat drum pattern that pops in occasionally. But the main sounds that we hear, they kind of feel like marimbas, like marimba synths almost. And there's like windy synths playing here. And they're all kind of fading out at the same time. And there's also these gargling bass drones that are really big, but they kind of fade out gradually, and eventually they're not there anymore. And then we're met with like what sounds like flickering, could be footsteps, it could be like water droplets that are just playing, and they repeat. And the sound of this keeps you enticed, but it never goes anywhere in the song, so you just kind of end on this uneasy note, like something is still there, but you're not sure what, and you're not sure what's about to happen next. Just imagine like a behemoth, a gigantic monster of biblical proportions has finally laid down to rest, and it's prepared to sleep for another millennia to be undisturbed, hopefully forever. Overall, this project is an exceptional body of work. I remember hearing a lot of these tunes that we heard throughout this project in the years following up to 2022, thanks to live sets that Sudden Death has performed. And I remember hearing like specific tunes and like drops that I remember hearing in those sets, and I was so happy to hear them released. Finally, they were previously unreleased tunes. Thankfully, everything has been packaged into a very clear and cohesive packaging that sounds like the most organic dubstep project that we've had in years. he did release two EPs, two iterations of this project before, entitled Voyd 1 and Voyd 1.5. They were released in 2018 and 2019, respectively. It's very clear to me that Sudden Death had a larger vision in mind for what he wanted this project to be. It's clear that he was working hard to flesh it out, to really create an entire experience rather than just nuggets and tidbits of really cool sounds. Of course, the theatrics are there, but they feel mature. It's not like Sudden Death is trying to be an edgelord that wants to scare you. It's more than that. I feel like Sudden Death is very dedicated to his artistic vision, and he's been fine tuning his sound for several years now. And this album feels like a culmination, a summation of all of those efforts, all of his work that he's been putting in. It all comes together very nicely in this. It is a pretty long project, but I think it's paced well. And I've been listening to it so many times since it dropped a couple weeks ago, and honestly, we'll be returning to this project as time goes on. As of yet, he has not announced any sort of like uh, maybe tour for this project, but I am eagerly awaiting for that announcement if and when it comes, because I definitely need to see him. But if you have not listened to Sudden Death, honestly, I do recommend giving him a listen. If you're not into dubstep, he is probably not going to appeal to you. But if you are interested in electronic music and really well made dubstep that kind of dabbles with different elements of like ambience and other more immersive styles, this is definitely the place to start. So yeah, if you've taken the time to listen to me rant about and rave about this newest project from Sudden Death, I really do appreciate you taking the time to do that. And if you have music, of course, that you would like to share with someone, don't hesitate to send it my way. I'll do my best to listen to it. And if you would like to hear what I think, I will definitely let you know. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great day.